Hello my friends, HM here, and in this video I'm going to talk about the energy needed to sustain civilizations into the future, both the near future and the far future. I wanted to make this video because energy is fundamental for life on Earth, not just humans, but all life. Simply put, without it, we all die. So in this video I will take a deep dive into what energy fundamentally is, how we create it currently, and how we will create it in the near-term future, and how we will create it in the far future. However, before we start, I'd like to say that HM Experience is a video blog that focuses on topics that would matter for whether the future of humanity will be better or worse. Today's topic obviously matters for that future because energy keeps us alive, and the price of energy is a big part of the price of everything else we consume. And also energy matters for whether we will have a polluted environment or not. And it also matters for national security. So energy is one of the truly important topics for whether our future will be good or bad. With that said, let's get to it. So this is my presentation, and I called it the energy to sustain civilizations for nearly eternity. I had a hard time figuring out a good title for this presentation, but this is what I ended up with. The presentation here covers quite a lot of things, and the best way to tell you what it really is about instead of using a title is to show you a presentation agenda. That agenda also follow the video timestamp, so it will be quite a long presentation, but you can save the video and come back to it and take it bit by bit. The first thing I'm going to talk about in the first chapter is energy production. What is it? And this guy up here, Albert Einstein, has made this famous equation E equals m times c squared. And that is actually what energy is, but I'll talk about that. I promise there won't be any hard math, and whatever math there is, it's hidden in Excel spreadsheet that can be downloaded if you're interested in the details. The next chapter will be that we'll use this equation here to calculate the efficiency of some sources of energy like wood, coal, oil, and also fission, nuclear fission, and nuclear fusion, and then antimatter. And now, if you don't know what that is, I'll explain it, of course. We'll go on and calculate more efficiencies simply to have a good overall picture of what is up and down when we talk about energy. So I also do it for natural gas, for food, general food items, and then glucose, protein, fat, and alcohol that we humans and other biologicals are using to feed ourselves with energy and nutrition. And I keep on. I go now out in the galaxy or the universe, you could say, because there are, spoiler alert, everything that goes on here on Earth is not at all efficient. It's really not efficient. But there are a couple of things that goes on in space among stars, and especially black holes and different types of black holes that are much more efficient, and where we'll probably end up building civilizations around black holes in the far future. But I'll talk about that. And now that we have all these efficiency measures that are comparable between the different sources of energy that can be used to make food or electricity, then we're going to talk a little bit about the efficiency of converting light into food or electricity in order to sustain biological civilizations. Luckily, that efficiency rate is a lot higher. And the ultimate sources of energy here in this universe, and also for humans, is light from either fusion that are artificial or fission that is artificially made by humans, or from stellar objects or black holes, lights that comes from that. So light conversion into fuels and electricity is something we need to investigate. And we investigate all the efficiency of the different options we have here. And then I'm going more down to earth again. I'm going to look at what is the current global electricity production by source. How does it look right now? How do we make our electricity? And then in chapter number 7, I'm going to talk about what is the cost of producing this electricity also by source. It will turn up, again, spoiler alert, that solar and wind power are actually already the lowest cost options It's lower cost than nuclear energy, it's lower cost than fossil fuels, and they're also growing by far faster because of that than any other resource. So we will end up with a whole lot more solar and wind power in our electricity supply. So, but that also means we need to deal with intermittency. Problem with solar and wind is that they do not produce a constant flow of energy. They produce energy dependent on whether the weather is sunny or not sunny, or whether the wind blows or not, of course. So, you need to deal with that. A problem you didn't have with fossil fuels, where you can simply turn on a switch and then get the power as you need on demand. And after that, I'll make a prediction about when production will become fully sustainable, when it's all can be made from wind, solar, and some intermittency solutions. And you will be surprised that it won't be far into the future. And then finally, I will conclude my presentation here, and I'll also talk about the best future use for nuclear fuels. Again, a little bit of spoiler alert, nuclear fuels are really not needed for making energy here on Earth, and they will be more costly than solar and wind, but they are critically needed for our civilization to expand into the universe, to go to other solar systems, and also to go to black holes where there is a lot more energy, because this solar system we live in right now will run out of its fuel and it will die, and we will die with it if we do not move on to other solar systems where there's still nuclear fuels to be burned in these stars, and also black holes. So, and we need nuclear fuels for that. It's the only way to make that travel, but I'll talk more about it. I'm definitely pro-nuclear, and I'm also pro-solar and wind power, but it's not for political reasons. It's purely for objective reasons, that it will make a better future with cheaper stuff to buy. Everything is made from energy and other stuff, and energy is a large part of that cost, and energy will be cheaper. Okay, with that said, I think we should get to the next slide and start our presentation here. That will be chapter 1. So, chapter 1, energy production, what is it? This presentation is based on an idea promoted by Elon Musk about first principle thinking, which is summed up, it is to boil things down to their fundamental truth and reason up from there, as opposed to reasoning by analogy. Most people, they reason by analogy, and it's the easiest way to reason, but if you really want to get to the bottom of it, you need to think in terms of first principles, where you actually need to get to the fundamental truth. So with that principle in mind, we should start this presentation by answering the question of what is energy production. And again, most people would answer, well, energy production, that's what happens at a power plant. And that answer is of course true, but not at a fundamental level. What really happens when energy is produced is that mass is converted into energy. That is what a physicist like Albert Einstein would tell you. And we should reason from that. Albert Einstein here, he discovered the world famous equation for this, E equals mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is a constant equal to the speed of light. For instance, Einstein's equation here can be used to calculate that the mass equal to 1 kilo or 2.2 pounds of mass can power a typical American household using 11,000 kilowatt hours per year for 2.3 million years. So there's an enormous amount of energy in just 1 kilo of mass, if we convert that into energy like kilowatt hours. And how do we calculate that using this Einstein formula? Well, we can calculate that the energy from 1 kilo is actually this astronomical large number here, lots of zeros, and that's energy in joule. And then we have 1 kilo, we just plot 1 kilo in here, and then we multiply that with the speed of light as measured in meters per second, and this is this large number here as well, 300 million meters per second. and then we square that. That's c squared. So we get that in joule, the energy in joule from 1 kilo. Then we convert energy in joule to kilowatt hours using this conversion formula here. And the years to power a typical household with 1 kilo of mass, that's of course just 25, rounded up, 25 billion kilowatt hours divided by 11,000 kilowatt hours that's needed to power a household for 1 year. And that will give us 2.3 million years. Now, the amazing thing about this is that we have used basically elementary school math here. There's nothing complicated going on. So anybody can use Einstein's E equals mc squared equation. To be honest, when I went into making this presentation, I thought that this E equals mc squared, there was something complicated, matrix equation notation or something behind it, so I'd probably not figure out how to use it. But then I found out, it's just plain simple elementary school math, and anybody can use it. That surprised me a little bit. I never really dig into it or tried to calculate anything until now. But now I made a spreadsheet, and it can be downloaded below, and you can make alternative calculations for yourself. Everything I do in this presentation is and if it involves a calculation or something, it will be done in that spreadsheet. But one thing we should note about this calculation is that it assumes that we can convert mass 100% efficiently into energy. And the problem with that assumption is that the commercial technology that humanity has currently invented and use here on Earth, it's grossly inefficient. So with that in mind, we should get to calculate how inefficient our currently available technologies of converting mass into energy is, because that will give us a fundamental understanding about what is possible and what is not possible, what kind of options we have and how good they are and bad they are in terms of energy. And that will just give us a better understanding rather than a superficial treatment of this topic. With that in mind, we go to chapter 2, which is efficiency of wood, oil, coal, fission and fusion and antimatter. Okay, so this table here kind of summarizes all my findings with regard to efficiency of converting mass to energy and with different kind of fuels. And I like the table form. If you just say it verbally in a video, I think most people will just have forgotten what was said fairly quickly. With this table here, you can always get back to the video or the PowerPoint presentation that you can download below and then quickly refresh what it was you actually learned in this video. A good place to start is to consider the early humans that learned to start a fire burning wood, because burning wood is really the first time humans started to use a fuel for making food and also for keeping warm during the winter. And the first evidence we have about that is about 200,000 years ago. There are a few studies. I just looked it up in my references. There are 5 studies that has indicate that we might have seen humans make fires from wood earlier than 200,000 years ago. I think the earliest one is 800,000 years ago. But if you only have 5 studies and the evidence is not super good, then it's not a conclusive evidence. We need more studies, better evidence. But 200,000 years ago, lots of studies that shows that humans could actually make a fire at will 200,000 years ago. And 200,000 years is nothing. It's in the history of Earth. The Earth is over 4 billion years old. So that's a lot of time, and only the past 200,000 years have humans been able to lit a fire to keep warm and to cook. And what happens here? The mass of fuel used. I calculate the mass of used fuel as 1 kilo of dry wood and also 1.6 kilo of oxygen needed to burn that dry wood. So we have a mass conversion here of 2.6 kilo. From that, we can get energy out in terms of heat and light. Other kinds of light. Heat is also light, that's just infrared light. And we get 5.3 kilowatt hours that we all can relate to kilowatt hours. A typical household use about, 30 kilowatt hours per day. So 5.28 kilowatt hours from burning 1 kilo of dry wood, and also the oxygen that needs to go into that burning process. But what is the mass of energy converted here when we use this Einstein's formula for E equals mc squared? Well, if you use it, and you can see the calculations in my spreadsheet if you download it, then it's only this is grams, so it's, 0, how many zeros are there? There are 6 zeros and then 211 grams of mass that is actually converted into energy. And from that we can calculate how much is this weight in percentage of the 2.6 kilo of fuel that we actually, of fuel that we used. What do they call when you include oxygen? It's not just fuel. You could call it propellants. In the space industry, you would call it propellant. That would be the combined oxygen and fuel. So the propellant is 2.6 kilo, and that mass we are converting into energy here is only, again, it's a very small number. How many zeros I have here? I have 8 zeros before there's an 8, and then 1 percentage. It's a super inefficient way to convert mass into energy, burning wood. So let's look at some of the other ways we can also convert mass into energy. We could be mining coal here and then make a chemical burn from coal. Now, coal contains more energy. As you can see, it contains burning 1 kilo of coal plus 2.7 kilo of oxygen. That's what we need to use here. That's 8.14 kilowatt hours. And then we get this mass here, not much higher than we burning wood. And then we get almost the same kind of efficiency as burning wood. And the reason is that we need more oxygen for burning wood. So the mass implied in this is higher. So we get about the same efficiency, which is incredibly inefficient mass conversion to energy. And then we can do the same thing for, maybe I should say, mining of coal is something that humans started doing. There's evidence that we started doing that 3,000 years ago. I thought that would be an interesting piece of information to have. So we've been mining coal there for the past 3,000 years, and we've been burning woods for the past 200,000 years. And then quite recently in our time scale, we started to make oil wells and oil refining. And the first oil well happened in 1850s. That's when kind of it started with oil. And here we have 1 kilo of oil plus 3.25 kilo of oxygen. We get 11.6 kilowatt hours of energy out of that. And then we can calculate how much mass is that. And then we can calculate the efficiency of it. Again, super low efficiency. So burning these woods and oils, it's not that efficient at all. So let's go to something that step it up a little in terms of efficiency. That's nuclear fission. That's specifically uranium-235 fission. Well, the first time it happened, we did it making a nuclear bomb, and that was in 1945. And 1 kilo of uranium-235 can be converted into 24 million kilowatt hours of energy. That's actually almost 1 gram. So 1 kilo, and no oxygen is used here. It's a nuclear fission where you split atomic nuclei into lighter atoms, and that will release energy. But still only, of 1 kilo of uranium, it's really only 1 gram of mass that is converted. And if you calculate how efficient is that in terms of percentage efficiency of mass conversion, well, let's round it up. It's 0.1% efficient. So what happens in a nuclear bomb here is 0.1% efficient. It's the same thing that happens in a nuclear power plant. It's also efficient. Here it's just controlled. And the first time we could actually control this process without having to detonate a bomb was in 1957. And it's of course the same numbers here. Okay, so next on this list here we have nuclear fusion. And that was first made by humans in 1952 when we detonated a hydrogen bomb. A hydrogen bomb is a nuclear bomb that first uses conventional explosives to set up an ordinary nuclear fission bomb. And they set off a couple of those around a core of hydrogen, a special kind of hydrogen. I believe it's a hydrogen mixed with lithium. And that will set off a nuclear fusion process, which is much more powerful because it melts nuclear cores together and generate more energy. I don't know how much I should get into it at this point. I probably shouldn't get much into it, but there are 1 kilo of deuterium and tritium mix that are actually fusioning, doing the fusion in a hydrogen bomb. Deuterium is hydrogen 2 and tritium is hydrogen 3. Normal hydrogen, which is the same that is in water, water is just hydrogen and oxygen that has burned to become water. But normal hydrogen is called hydrogen 1, and it has a proton as its core and then an electron around it. That's hydrogen. Hydrogen 2, which is deuterium, has a proton and a neutron in its core and then an electron around it. And tritium is hydrogen that has 1 proton and 2 neutrons. It's a little complicated how this is done, and I don't think I'll discuss it right here. I think there's another opportunity later in my video to explain it a little more carefully. But anyway, it releases a lot of energy. 1 kilo of this deuterium and tritium releases 116 million kilowatt hours, which is almost 5 grams of mass that is converted into pure energy. So it's almost 0.5% efficient. That's the highest efficiency and far, far higher than any of the more conventional human fuels here like wood and coal and oil. So that's why you can get so much power out of it. Unfortunately, we haven't mastered nuclear fusion in a non-bomb setting, in a non-military setting, so where you could produce energy like electricity out of it. But that will come. And actually, recently there was a breakthrough, which is not that much of a breakthrough. It has been overdone by the media by a lot, where we could actually, for the first time, get a little more energy out of trying to create fusion in a control experiment rather than the energy needed to start this fusion. So you got a little more energy out of it. But for various reasons, I won't come into it. It's not that important as it sounds, but they were probably looking for more funding, and so they make it a big deal. It's not. We are still decades away from having commercial use of fusion energy for making electricity, unfortunately. But we will get there. I'm sure of it. But it's a very hard problem to crack. And then the final thing that is in this table here is antiprotons that we actually created at a Berkeley lab, Bevatron lab, it was called. And but we only created a very tiny amounts of antiprotons. But the thing about it's called antimatter, and there are many kinds of antimatter. You can also have electrons that are the antiparticle of an electron is a positron. And the thing about antimatter, which it is called in physics, is that they completely annihilate. You just need to bring them together. Ordinary matter that we are made of and that all of the universe practically is made of, bring that together with some antimatter and it will completely annihilate and become energy. So it's 100%, 1 kilo of that would be half a kilo of antimatter and half a kilo of ordinary matter. Bring that together and we will generate this very large amount of energy. That would be those 25 billion kilowatt hours that we got from the little example that I calculated. It's a 100% conversion. 1,000 gram, all of it is converted into energy. That was what could power a home for 2.4 million. Was it 2.4 or 2.1 million years, an ordinary household? And in principle, we could make that because we are already able to make different kinds of antimatter in the labs today. But the problem is we use a whole lot more energy creating this antimatter than this antimatter is able to generate when we annihilate it subsequently. But really it is the holy grail of, you could say, rocket fuel. That would be to create a lot of antimatter and then bring that for a spaceship. That would be nice to have, but I think it would be too dangerous to carry it around because it can any contact with ordinary matter and it explodes. So it's super easy to set off. So I'm not sure it will be used for powering rockets in the future. I don't know. Okay, so that was this table just to give you an overview of what is possible with some fuels that we know and also some of the nuclear fuels here. And I should mention here that I have sources for everything I said and calculated in this table. You can download this presentation and there is a source to everything I've done here. And all the calculations, of course, are in this Excel spreadsheet, and there's another slide here with these sources. So that's how you can confirm that I'm not talking BS here and that it's actually true what I've calculated in these tables. Okay, so that would be it. Then we'll proceed with chapter 3, which is we'll continue with some efficiency calculations, this time of natural gas, and then food and some general food and then specific foods like glucose, that's sugar, protein, fat, and alcohol, and see how much mass is converted to energy in these fuels. Okay, so I have created this table here to show my results for calculating the efficiency of gas and food and glucose, protein, fat, and alcohol. So let's start with looking at natural gas here. It's a chemical burn. And first gas wells where humans started to drill for that, for our civilization, to power our civilization, was in 1823. That's the first gas well drilled. Gas, funny enough, it uses a lot of oxygen here. So those of you who follow the space industry for making rockets to go to space, all the rage there for making modern rockets is that we have to use natural gas and burn that instead of other rocket fuels that have previously dominated, like a variant of diesel fuel and stuff. But what is special about this fuel is that it uses a lot of oxygen, 4 kilo for 1 kilo of natural gas. That's the highest I have seen in my, you could say, survey of fuels that we use. So you can also see here energy produced is quite high, 15.4 kilowatt hour. But then again, if you convert that into how much mass does that represent, it is very little mass. And also the efficiency in percentage of mass of energy conversion is very, very low, although it's among the highest so far we have seen. You can remember the previous percentages, so they were lower than this. For oil, coal, and wood, they were all lower than this. Okay, then we go to another source here of energy. That's simply food that we eat. And I've taken ourselves as our own species here, the human, or Homo sapiens as we are called as a species. And we use cellular respiration to digest food. And our species here was kind of the earliest kind of our species dates 300,000 years back, which is nothing in Earth history because the Earth is many billion years old. So we are a very new species here on this planet, and You could, of course, go further back than 300,000 years, but then it would no longer be Homo sapiens, and then it would be a different species that represent our forefathers, because that's how evolution works. The more time, the more the species changes, and at some point you'll simply call it a new species, put a new name on it. Anyway, we use, in the army, I was in the army many years ago, we got 1 kilo of food. We got a ration, a package of food to sustain our life throughout one day, and it was about 1 kilo. And then we also got some water, of course, to keep alive. So I've calculated how much energy is there in 1 kilo of typical fuel, and how much oxygen do you use to burn that fuel. And we know that humans use respiration to digest our food, and it's about 3.37 kilowatt hours. I think that's an interesting number. To keep an adult man here, women it's lower, alive for one day, typically it's 3.4 kilowatt hours. You can compare that to what you use in electricity in a household. That might be 30 kilowatt hours or something. So 1/10 of what you use in your household. That's what you use to power yourself throughout the day. And the efficiency of this, when you calculate it, it's actually not a whole lot of oxygen used to burn through here, also because it's not all fuel. There's also water in it, which doesn't have any energy. But the efficiency of this is pretty high, I'd say. It's lower, of course, than natural gas, but it's still pretty high. And let's go to, I think humans can boast to, we are pretty complicated as a life organism. I think we can do both the two kind of respiration that are the main thing. It's called aerobic respiration, uses oxygen, and then anaerobic respiration that does not use oxygen. The most efficient kind of respiration is naturally the one that uses oxygen. And most of what goes on in our bodies as humans, that's this oxygen burning thing. And that's why we need to breathe all the time in and out to get some oxygen in, to keep that fuel burning process going. And you could say it's a low temperature burn, unlike this natural gas, which is a chemical hot burn. This is a respiratory process. It's low temperature, and that's how life functions. But although our species is only about 300,000 years old, the principle that our species uses, namely this aerobic respiration, that dates 2.4 billion years ago to bacteria. And a funny thing here is that life, I'm not a biologist, so I should know a lot more about it if I was a biologist, but I know a little bit about it. And what I do know is that life is largely a cut and paste thing of genes from one organism to another organism. That's evolution. It's a gradual change of genes over time to form new and steadily more complex organisms, or just different organisms over time. And it goes all the way from, you could say, bacteria on the early Earth all the way to humans. But we still have a lot of things in common because it is cut and paste. And our ability to do this aerobic respiration, that dates 2.4 billion years back. So some of the genes that these bacteria had, they're still in our DNA, and we are using it. We share an awful lot of DNA with other animals, just unimaginable. I believe that yeast that you use to make bread or beer with, we share some 23% of the genes in a yeast. That's inside our genes as well. So we are 23% identical with yeast. That's crazy. And of course, with chimpanzee monkeys, we are something like 99.9% identical from our biological construct and genes. It's only a tiny little thing, but a very important thing that makes us far more intelligent than these monkeys. But otherwise, we function identically. By the way, I have a funny story. My dad is a veterinarian. He's still alive, but he doesn't practice his business anymore. But I have helped him operate cats and dogs on hundreds of times. So I know the anatomy of cats and dogs, and it's the same, completely the same inside a cat and a dog as it is in a human. So it's obvious to see that we are the same. There's a lot of copying of what goes on in another animal up to us. Even a mouse or a rat, it's very identical to how we are constructed. They got hearts and livers and digestion system and all that stuff. It's the same. It's just dimensioned a little bit different. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. We can also see something here that this aerobic respiration, it's a lot more efficient. In the end, it uses a molecule called glucose, and then it converts that glucose into another molecule that is called ATP, and converts one glucose molecule apparently to 38 of these ATPs. And that ATP is kind of the fundamental energy unit that our cells in our bodies use to do all the work, like move our hands, think a thought. While I'm speaking here, I use ATPs to power my brain cells and so forth. So everything we do is powered by these ATPs. And it's the same in other life forms, rats and bacteria and stuff. But the thing that the biologists called metabolism is the whole thing from eating some food and then breaking it down into more smaller things, and it'll probably end up with this glucose, and then that's broken down into this ATP. So it's a whole thing. What can I say? Anaerobic respiration, that the one that doesn't use oxygen, it's even older than the one that uses oxygen. It dates 3.5 to perhaps even 4 billion years back. So it's really the very earliest kind of life that started here. And I'm not so sure here, but I don't think all anaerobic respiration, these very early bacteria or what we had there 3.5 billion years ago, at that time photosynthesis didn't even exist, so energy did not come from the sun. It came from chemicals that were available on Earth and that was produced by volcanic activity and stuff from heat from within the Earth. And that kind of activity has produced hydrogen and also natural gas or CH4 and also sulfur. And bacteria, the first early life here, they could feed on that. So not photosynthesis. But of course, if you have a bacteria that feed on this, then that would create probably glucose in its own fabric of how it makes itself up. And then, of course, when you have that, then some bacteria might start feeding on other bacteria to get what energy they have, and stuff like that happens. So life will kind of start from there. Okay. Then I have this glucose is the same as sugar. Or hydrocarbons. It's just a special molecule that's very simple. So there are many kind of sugars or hydrocarbons, and glucose is probably one of the simplest and easiest to digest of them. But there are also, of course, we know when we look at food that we buy in the supermarket, it's typically there's a little label that says how much hydrocarbon, how much protein, how much fat. So I thought it would be interesting also to look at that. So this glucose, that's sugars, that's 4.3 kilowatt hours of energy. And then we have protein, that's a little higher, just only barely so. And then we have fat, a lot higher in energy. And then we have alcohol, it's somewhere in between. And here we can see the percentages. Actually, fat is very high because the efficiency of that is very high, because we don't burn a whole lot of oxygen here. So it's even a little bit higher than natural gas. That was actually the highest of all the typical fuels that that humanity here uses, like oil and coal and wood. But fat here seems to be even higher in efficiency. Okay, I do have this table with sources where you can check what I have plotted into this table and also learn a lot more about how life is and where it originated. So please go ahead and do that. Download my PowerPoint presentation and follow these links. Okay, let's move on. So chapter 4, that is about the efficiency that happens in star fusion and also 3 types of black hole energy. That will complete my, you could say, efficiency survey of what forms of energy that a civilization could possibly draw energy from and how efficient these different sources are. Now, so star fusion and 3 types of black hole energy, that means we go from Earth out in the universe and discover what else happens out there, because stuff happens there that is pretty interesting. Maybe I should drill a little bit about the 3 pictures I have here on my chapter 4 slide. The first picture should be kind of obvious. It's a picture of our own sun. So that's how our sun looks like. It's a big exploding ball, and it of course has fusion inside of it. Fusion is happening here. That's what drives the energy of a star. And the next picture here is a picture that researchers took in 2000. Let me see my notes here. In 2019, it was the first picture ever produced of a black hole. Black holes, they suck up light and matter, and nothing can escape it, so that's why we call it a black hole. But actually, quite a lot of light does escape from a black hole, just not light or matter that has fallen below its event horizon. That will not escape. But everything that is above that event horizon of the black hole can escape. So a lot of energy can escape from outside the black hole before it falls in. Anyway, this picture was taken, and I thought that was interesting. It's a black hole that's far, far away from us in another galaxy. I can't remember how far away it is, but it's a very, very large black hole. It's unfathomable large, and that's why we can have a picture of it even if it's so far away. To be exact, it actually has a mass that is 6.5 billion times that of our own solar system. This is called a supermassive black hole because it's really one of the giants out there among black holes. There are some that are bigger, but this one is the first one we took a picture of. It's called Messier 87. That's the name of this black hole. Then we have a third picture here, and that's the second picture we have ever taken of a black hole. But this black hole, you could say, is more interesting because it's a black hole that resides at the center of our own Milky Way. So this is the most important object that is in our galaxy that we are part of, that Earth is part of. It's actually very close. From Earth to the center of our galaxy where this black hole resides is, I think it was 27,000 light years. And the mass of this black hole is what holds the Milky Way together, plus something called black matter that we don't know what is, but we know it's there because of the way that the Milky Way is a spiral galaxy with spiral arms, and it rotates around this black hole that is this black hole in the center that pulls all the stars together that are in orbit around this black hole, because it has a lot of mass. But how much mass does it have? Well, it is only actually 4 point something million solar masses. So a lot less than this other black hole that's more than 1,000 times bigger than this one. Whenever you discover a star or another object out there in the universe for the first time, you are allowed to call it a name. That's the honor you get from discovering something for the first time. And this guy who discovered this black hole, the most important object in our galaxy, he called it Sagittarius A, and then the symbol for multiplier on the keyboard. So that's the name, the official name on Sagittarius A, multiplier symbol. Bad name if you ask me. Truly bad name for the most important object we have in our Milky Way. It should have a Beautiful name. Not a name like this. You know, we have good names, I think, for most of our planets in our solar system. Apart from Uranus, that's a mistake. But every other planet we have, or dwarf planet, have pretty nice names, I think. But this one, it's just a sidestep. And maybe I talk too much about it. But anyway, I thought you should know about these pictures. They're not completely arbitrary. Thought a little bit about it. Okay, so I have this table here where I have again calculated all the efficiencies, and I start in the first two rows here. I start with something we have seen before in the previous slides. I start with nuclear fission and nuclear fusion from the hydrogen bomb, just so you can see the efficiencies here. So nuclear fission, that's a nuclear power plant. That's 0.1% efficient. And nuclear fission as an atomic bomb is 0.47% efficient. But the fusion that happens in our sun, here in our solar system, that's more efficient. It's 0.7% efficient. So more than this 0.47%. And that's because it fusions ordinary hydrogen 1. 4 of those are fusioned into one helium, or ordinary helium. And by the way, fusion in our sun happened 4.6 billion years ago. We also know that in 7 more billion years into the future, then all the hydrogen that is in our sun will have been used up, or rather all the hydrogen that can fusion, that is allowed to fusion, will have been used up. There's still a lot more hydrogen left, but not all of it will be used. And then another fusion starts, and that's fusioning helium into carbon, and that will happen 7 billion years from now. There's a lot less energy in that. It's even less efficient than fission, nuclear fission, so at 0.063%. And I'll get back to that with a few other slides that will come why that is so. So you can see there are the most efficient form of fusion that exists in the universe is young solar systems that have hydrogen 1 left in them to fusion. And I might also say that I think that is interesting, that actually the temperatures in our sun and in most suns out there, they're not high enough for fusion to happen by itself. If you get high enough temperatures, nuclear atoms will start to fusion. But the temperature is not high enough. We need, for hydrogen to start fusioning, you actually need more than 100 million degrees Celsius. But our sun at the core is only about 15 million degrees Celsius, or Kelvin. And that's not hot enough. So why is any fusion happening at all in the sun? That's because of quantum tunneling, the weird thing that happens at the subatomic level, that is quantum tunneling, that no particle that exists, like the protons and neutrons that are inside the nuclei of an atom, they don't sit still. They are vibrating, and this vibration means that sometimes they are at another place, far away from where they're supposed to be because of quantum tunneling. And because of that effect, that is extremely rare. It happens very, very rarely for any given atom, like with an occurrence of a billion years between. Then it happens to be outside of the atom itself. That's quantum tunneling. And then it's back again in the core of the atom. It's only because of these quantum tunneling effects that you actually have fusion happening. Only when a particle, a proton from a hydrogen atom, quantum tunnel and bump into the core of another hydrogen atom, then some fusion can happen. I think it's amazing that no fusion would happen in the sun unless it was for the extremely rare occurrence of quantum tunneling. It's just a little side note here. Okay. But there are other phenomena in the universe that can produce energy, and those are in particular black holes. A black hole If you don't know what it is, I think most people will know what a black hole is, but those who don't. A black hole is a point in space that has so much mass that it has become a singularity that bends space so much that nothing can escape from the gravity of that point in space. And then it becomes a black hole. Everything that goes into it, even light that travels at the speed of light, it doesn't travel fast enough to be able to escape that point in space. So everything that falls into that black hole, it pretty much stays there forever. But then again, it doesn't. But for all practical means, it stays there forever when it falls into that black hole. So that sounds pretty scary, but it is actually not. So you would think that with a black hole, no energy could ever come out of that. But that's not true at all. In fact, more energy comes out of black holes than from stars. And that's kind of amazing. There's something called black hole accretion, which is the fact that whenever you try to throw something into, or whenever a star or some dust from a nebula, that's a cloud of dust and gases in the universe, that's called a nebula. Whenever such a nebula or a star or a planet or anything falls into this black hole, it will start to rotate at extremely fast speeds around this black hole before it actually is falling completely into the black hole. And when it rotates, a lot of kinetic energy, because these atoms that these stars or nebulas are made up of, they'll bump into each other, and the temperature will increase actually to millions of degrees, and they will start to radiate a lot of light out. Not all of that light will fall into the black hole. In fact, a lot of it will escape as strong radiation from this accretion disk. We call it the accretion disk, from this rotating matter that are rotating around the black hole. And I looked up how much energy that is actually radiated back from this accretion disk, and some studies have said 40%. That sounds a little high, but then again, I'm not the guy who do these calculations, so I'd have to trust whatever I read. But of course, when read something that sounds a little bit high, it's better to look for different sources from different scientists. And other scientists have calculated that this accretion process only radiates 6% out for non-rotating black holes, and for black holes that rotates, it will be 32%. No matter whether it's 6% or 40%, it's still quite a lot higher than the highest energy that can be made from fusion, which was 0.7%. And also, don't be upset if some scientist doesn't agree about some numbers here. Black holes is still a mystery in many regards, and the mechanisms and the kind of matter that can fall into black hole can vary a lot. And depending on, so you have to make some assumptions when you do a calculation about how much energy is radiated back. Then you'd have to make some assumptions about what it is, what kind of stuff that falls into the matter, because all of this will affect your calculation about how much energy is radiated back. I can tell you, if a so-called neutron star or a white dwarf, or if a neutron star falls into a black hole, it will create a kilonova. It's a massive explosion that is 1,000 times bigger than a supernova. So, and it will blow off a lot of material at an enormous rate of energy. So if that happens, a lot of energy will probably be released, but that's not the only thing that can fall into a black hole, and it will fall in very differently according to what kind of material that are falling in. So that's why you could see some scientists disagree about how much is radiated, because it depends on the situation, what kind of black hole it is, and so forth. So black hole accretion is basically kinetic energy that increases temperature, and then stuff starts to radiate out, because higher temperature means it starts to emit light that you could then harvest actually with solar panels that you build around a black hole. But I'll come a little bit back to that. Then we have a rotating black hole. You could say our own Earth is rotating. We are an object in space and we are rotating. That's why we are experiencing day and night, because we rotate. That means the sun is here in the center and then the Earth rotate, and then that's how day and night happens here on Earth. But every other object, many other objects in the universe also rotate. The sun could even be rotating. Black holes can also be rotating. And if that happens, the singularity inside the black hole will be it will not be a singularity. It will be have a complex form of a ring. And there is a way to harvest the energy from a rotating black hole. In order for a future civilization far, far into the future to harvest energy from a rotating black hole, it could create a big superstructure around the black hole with mirrors that will reflect light back to the black hole. And then all you need to do is to shoot some low energy light into a rotating black hole. Then that will be slingshot back, you could say, because of the nature of a rotating black hole. Slingshot back with a lot more energy than when it was sent into the black hole. And if there are mirrors, this higher energy light will then be reflected back into the black hole, that will then be slingshot with even more energy. So you can kind of keep making more energy. And then, of course, some of that energy could be harvested with solar panels to create electricity. So that's how you could harvest basically the energy of a rotating black hole. And the great thing about the rotating black hole is that it could be a supermassive rotating black hole. So one of those with billions of times the mass of our own solar system. And if you can get, as you can see here, someone has calculated that you can get at most 29% of the kinetic energy in a rotating black hole back. That's an enormous amount of energy that you can get out of a rotating black hole. And with the mass being so high, this is the biggest source of energy that we could imagine that will exist far, far, far into the future. It has many, 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 many times more energy than a sun, and it can use that energy a lot more efficiently than a sun that burns hydrogen and do fusion. The last civilizations that will remain, if we start expanding into the universe, they will remain along these supermassive black holes that are rotating until we have used up all the rotating energy of that black hole and it will stop rotating. Then the civilization will finally die. There is a name for how you harvest energy from a rotating black hole. It's called super radiant scattering. Okay, then we go to the last form of way that we know that we could harvest energy from black holes, and that is this Hawking radiation. I think most of us have heard about this Hawking's, this guy in the wheelchair who had a horrible disease that destroyed all his muscles, so he can't move, and the only thing he could was like blink with one eye, and he used that to write articles and books in physics, because his brain was fantastic. It functions very good. And then he could blink and he had a machine where the alphabet was running through on a little screen on the glasses he had. And whenever he saw a letter that he wanted to spell, he blinked with that eye. That was the only muscle he had left. And then he spelled that letter. So can you imagine writing an entire book on physics, blinking with your eyes? That's the only way he could communicate. And just saying one sentence when you have to speak to another human being takes a lot of time, because you have to blink through the alphabet all the time. Horrible and just absolutely unincredible how that man has gotten the most out of his life in a very difficult situation. Anyway, he did something. He wrote an article, and it carries his name because he wrote it together with another guy, but still carry his name. It's called Hawking radiation. That's another way to how black holes can actually emit energy, but it's a strange way of emitting energy. Very large black holes, they emit so little energy from Hawking radiation that it's not even at billions of 1 watt. So you cannot run a civilization from Hawking radiation from a large black hole. It's only the tiniest of black holes that are less than the size of an atom, because they come in all sizes, that actually emit a lot of energy, and that almost becomes, or that not almost, it becomes like a nuclear bomb explosion at the end. That's how a black hole can eventually die and evaporate into the energy. But if you give it enough time, even the largest of black holes will radiate all its energy and all its mass. It will simply disappear by radiating energy at an enormously slow rate. But after trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of years, if you do that for a long enough time, then this black hole will also disappear. And it's pretty profound if it's true, and most physicists believe it's definitely true. It happens. Black Hawking radiation is a real thing. We haven't observed it experimentally, that should be said, but I'm pretty sure it's just a matter of time before we observe it. You could also say that Einstein predicted the existence of black hole because his own theory said they should be there. And now we have confirmed black holes not only by observations of objects that move around in space. That's how we discovered black holes the first time. But we have now also got pictures, direct pictures of it. You have a black hole picture right here, right up here. And we have also measured the gravitational waves that these black holes are sending out when they bend time and space in the universe, when they collide with other black holes or other neutron stars and stuff. So we have many kinds of proof that black holes do exist. And we'll also eventually get proof of Hawking radiation existing. I don't think I'll explain Hawking radiation. It's a little complicated. It's quantum theory. So much I can say. And it's not because I'm particularly clever. I'm an economist, so everything I know about this is something I've read on the internet and watch YouTube videos about. But I'm a curious person, so I do spend some time reading about it. So that was Hawking radiation. It's not really useful for civilizations because it's too little energy. And only the smallest black holes actually radiate enough energy to power something useful, but they only last for such a short time, like a few seconds or milliseconds, that's not useful either for civilization. And so really the big hope is black hole accretion and rotating black holes with super radiant scattering. That's where we will harvest energy from in the far, far future, of advanced civilization still being around there. Okay, I might, as some of the final comments on this table, talk a little bit about the lifespan of these different objects in our universe. So normally a sun will have, when a sun is formed from a condensing nebula cloud of dust in the universe, it will have a life. Let's use our own solar system. Our own solar system is 4.6 billion years old, and it will live on another 7 billion years. Then we'll start to fuse this helium into carbon. And then shortly after that, 100 million years, or just a few 100 million years, it will have used up all of its nuclear energy, and it will become a white dwarf. A white dwarf is a dead star that doesn't have any nuclear fusion occurring anymore in it, because it has no fuel left to do it with, and it hasn't exploded in a supernova or something. It was too small for that. So all it has left is a lot of heat in the material that's left, and it will of course be hot, and that heat will radiate out in space, and the temperature of the remains, the white dwarf here, will keep falling, and that will continue until the star will become no longer emit visible light. Then it will become what we call a black dwarf, And then black dwarf will further cool down to basically the temperature of the universe, which also keeps falling. So essentially it will approach 0 Kelvin at the end. But that will take a very long time before it approaches 0 Kelvin. But there has been some different estimates about how long the life of a white dwarf will be before it becomes a black dwarf. And NASA's homepage is saying about 10 billion years. But then there's some other sources on the internet that have much, much longer lifespans, which again to me sounds not believable. But then again, who am I to have such an opinion on that? I would trust that source from NASA because it's NASA and, a lot of scientists there. So 10 billion years is probably the real number for a white dwarf. We have observed some white dwarfs, but we have not observed any black dwarfs because they take longer time than our universe is old to form. Anyway, stars will keep forming. All star formation will be definitely over, and all fusion in those stars will be over and will all be white dwarfs, and they'll become black dwarfs within 1 trillion years. That's 1,000 billion years. But there will still be, at that time, these rotating black holes left that can be used for energy harvesting. And they could exist for many, many trillions of years into the future. And because of that, because they have a bigger lifespan, and because they basically have a lot more energy than a single star, like thousands of times more energy to be harvested than a star that was active, then I think that the future of humanity, maybe not humanity, but the future of civilizations with intelligent beings, they will gather around these black holes and live there to the truly final end of this universe. Now, and also I have a little extra thing to say about fusion, and that I will explain in the next few slides and before we have done with this chapter here. It's actually not that hard to understand why you can get an energy efficiency of 0.7% in a star in our own solar system by fusion of ordinary hydrogen to helium, and then that drops enormously when we go to the next possible way of creating fusion from helium to carbon. That's not difficult to explain, and it's funny to know about. So let's take a look at it. In order to understand that process, we have to look at the curve of nuclear binding energy. And this is this curve here that's depicted here. And what does it depict? It depicts a mass number. That's how heavy an atom is. And the weight of an atom is basically, you can count how many protons is in an atom plus how many neutrons, and then you just sum them up. So an ordinary hydrogen atom, that would only have one proton in its core and surrounded by a cloud of a single electron. And that's depicted here. It's down right here. There's a little red dot there. That's hydrogen 1. And then there are all the other atoms all the way up here to the highest numbers, which is uranium and some other heavy stuff that goes on up here, and all their isotopes. So basically all these red dots here is all the atoms that exist and all their isotopes. That's what this curve here depicts. And then it depicts, for each of these possible forms of atoms that exist, it depicts this curve, the binding energy per nucleon, that is the core of the atom, in 1 million electrovolts. And how should we read this curve? It's not difficult, I promise. We should read this curve that whenever it's positively sloped, it means that there is positive energy to be harvested from nuclear fusion. And we can read that energy approximatively correctly simply by taking the binding energy here that we can read out in this graph, and then let's say it's hydrogen. Now I'll go to the next slide because there's a zoomed in version of this graph here, and then it's easier to explain. So here it is, the next graph. It's the same graph, but it's just zoomed in. So here we have hydrogen, and it's hydrogen 1 with a mass number of 1, of course 1 proton and no neutrons in it. And that one we should fusion into a helium-4 atom. That's what goes on in our sun. And how do we calculate the energy release from such a fusion process? Looking at this graph here, well, I've done it down here in the notes here. You can see you go from this 0. You take the binding energy of helium, it's 7, and then you subtract the binding energy of hydrogen, which is 0 here, and that will give you 7, of course. And then because we need 4 of these hydrogen atoms to fusion into 1 helium atom, it's helium-4 from hydrogen 1, that's 4. Then we just multiply that energy with 4, and then we get 28 million electrovolts. That's how much energy that's released when we do that fusion. And then we can do the next thing. For instance, we can see here when the next thing that will happen in that sun is that helium fusion into carbon-12. And how do we calculate the energy that's available from that fusion? Well, it's the same calculation, really. We just read this graph here and see that it goes from 7 million electrovolts to 7.7 million electrovolts. So we subtract these two numbers from each other, and then we see we need 4 helium atoms to form 1 carbon atom, because carbon number here is 12 and here's 4, and 4 up in that's 3. So that's 7.7 minus 7, that's 0.7 times 3, that's 2.1 million electrovolt. And then, of course, how much energy is that compared to the energy of hydrogen fusion? Well, that's simply divide this number with this number. Then we get 7.5%. Now, that's how easy it is to make these calculations. But of course, that's because I show you the quick and dirty calculation for it. In the physicists, they know a more accurate way to do it that is way more complicated than this. And that is beyond the scope of this presentation here. All you should know is that the true number is 9%. It's not 7.5% when you do it the truly right way. And also this number up here with 28 million electrovolt, it's not 28 million electrovolt. It's something, I think it's 26 million electrovolt when you do it the right way. But again, that's beyond the scope to explain that. It's just a quick and dirty explanation that's really good enough for most people. And for me, personally, I don't need to know the super complex way of doing it. But I thought that would be an interesting thing to know about. And here, that's another zoom of the same graph. Here we can also see that there is a maximum on this graph, and that's iron, Fe, that's iron atoms. And after here, it has a maximum, but then the curve starts to go down. And that means energy is now used. If you want to create fusion of iron atoms into heavier atoms like uranium or plutonium or something, or gold, then you actually need to spend energy, because then when you do the same calculation as I just did in the previous slide here, then you'll start to have negative numbers. And that means you need to spend more energy for making that fusion happen than you get out of it. But that also explains why it actually is possible, why you can actually get energy from splitting atoms. We have some uranium, especially this uranium-235, which is an isotope that is unstable. So you can split it by bombarding it with some neutrons. Then that will split it. A neutron will split it, and then it releases energy. Why does it release energy? Because it's on the downward slope here. And then it becomes 2 lighter atoms that are further up here. Then it releases energy. So whenever you go from a lower point to a higher point, on this curve, you release this energy. So fusion is happening all the way here and up, but only the fusion that happens up until iron is actually generating excess energy. Whenever fusion is from on this side of the curve, it requires energy, but then fission, splitting of atoms, can actually make energy if you have the right isotopes that are unstable enough to be split. So that's just a little thing that would finalize my speech around these nuclear energy forms that we have. And here again, you can see there are some sources. All the sources I've used here for the previous slides, I have them here, so you can study them and read even more about what is up and down in what I've explained a little bit about. So the next chapter here is chapter 5, and here we'll get a little back to Earth again. We'll talk about the efficiency of converting light into food or electricity in order to sustain biological civilizations. So let's talk about that. So the past chapters discussed how we could convert mass into energy using various methods, and we could calculate the efficiencies according to Einstein's E equals mc squared of that conversion. The big takeaway from these chapters are that chemical fuels like fossils or food are grossly inefficient. It's a tiny, tiny little percentage of the mass that's converted into energy. But nuclear fission and fusion, that's a lot better. But still quite low efficiency at maximum 0.7% efficiency. What is much more efficient is black hole technology that we talked about that could have efficiencies from 6 to 40%. But of course, there are no black holes in the vicinity of Earth, and in order to ever exploit that energy, we would have to become a spacefaring civilization that is capable of interstellar travel and perhaps even intergalactic travel. And I hope we'll become that one day for sure. And it might not take that long with what SpaceX is doing with their rockets that are reusable. That will really revolutionize the cost of getting to space at a much more affordable price. Okay. But there are two kinds of energy that are needed to sustain a modern civilization of biological beings. And it's very simple. It's just we need some food and we need electricity to run all our machines in a modern civilization. And food and electricity, they're ultimately made from converting energy and light into chemical or electric energy. That's not the same as we have done in the previous chapters here of calculating efficiency using E equals mc squared. This is different because it's a conversion of energy from one energy form to another energy form, not of mass to energy. So the next obvious thing we need to do is to consider some different technologies for converting light into electricity or food. So let's do that. And here I've done that in this table that pretty much summarizes all the different technologies we have available, or at least the most important ones. And let's start with food, how we do make food. We do that with photosynthesis, not a technology invented by humans, but nature figured it out by coincidence and evolution. And many of the food plants that we have, they date 420 million years back. And they have an efficiency of typically of 1.5% efficiency. That efficiency might have been much lower 400 million years ago, but current modern food plants, they have an efficiency of about 1.5%. And the most efficient plant that we know of today, they have a conversion of light to chemical energy with about 4.3% efficiency. So only 4.3% of the energy that is inside light is actually stored as chemical energy in these plants. It goes much better if we go to machines that are not biological. If we take a typical photovoltaic PV cell, one junction, that means one layer of photovoltaic material, and that is non-concentrated. Such a cell today has an efficiency of 23.3% conversion, which is really high. And it's still rising, as we shall see soon in a graph that I'll show you. But the most efficient solar cells that we can produce, they are so-called four-junction concentrator cells. Concentrator cells means that they are concentrating solar light from some mirrors that shines to this solar cell. And four-junction means that there are 4 layers of photovoltaic material that basically target different wavelengths in sunlight and convert that into electricity. And they are actually, now we have gotten to the point where they are converting 47.1% of that energy in the sunlight into pure electricity, which is really, really high. So that's how nature does it, and that's how we can do it directly, also using solar cells. But most electricity is not generated with solar cells. We will see how much in a later chapter, how much exactly that's generated from solar cells and other sources. Most is generated using electric generators. And electric generators, they use mechanical energy, which is rotating or something that moves, that's mechanical energy, and to convert that into electricity. And they do it at quite high efficiencies, at 95% efficiency. You could probably even find generators, electric generators, that have even higher efficiency. In fact, with superconducting magnets and stuff, you could get close to 100% efficiency of that energy conversion. But for cost reasons, we don't use superconducting magnets for generators. We just use room temperature magnet, not necessarily magnets. But anyway, in the early days of industrialization, of the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine appeared. That was the first way that humans found a way to make mechanical energy from burning something. So we burned wood to start with, and later on we started to fire them up with coal. But so that steam engine has been very important for development of modern civilization. But it's only 15% efficient, the conversion there of chemical energy to mechanical energy. And because it needs chemical energy, which we can only make from photosynthesis up here, that at most are 4.3% efficient. In order to create the total efficiency of this system from photon end efficiency, from photons to fuel or electric energy, then we need to make this calculation. First, we need the fuel, 4.3% efficient from made from photosynthesis. And then we have the efficiency of the steam engine, that was 15% efficient. That's a mechanical conversion efficiency. And then we need a conversion in an electric generator that's 95% efficient. So we end up with something that is electricity from a steam engine that's only 0.61% efficient from the energy in the solar light that we ultimately need to make this happen. And there's no way of cheating that, but saying that, well, we just use fossil fuels and that's how we do it. We shouldn't multiply with this 4.3%. Well, fossil fuels are also made from, originally that's made from photosynthesis again. And then it's just rotten biomass that has been fossilized in a geological process. I guarantee you that the fossil fuels and all the energy that's lost in going from biological fresh state to fossil, they have lost nearly all of the energy. It's only a tiny bit of energy that's left. So the best we can hope for in terms of these efficiency calculations, that's actually those 4.3% of making fresh biomass that we can use to power steam engine and then make electricity. We also have invented the internal combustion engine that has been, well, very important for modern civilization. And that's a little more efficient. It has a 20% conversion efficiency from gasoline or ethanol, the chemical energy in gasoline or ethanol, and then into mechanical energy. And then again, we make this calculation of 4.3% of creating this fuel using photosynthesis, multiply that with 20% for the mechanical conversion, and then from mechanical to electric conversion, multiply that with 95%, and then we get zero. The end result is 0.82% efficiency. Now we have also, how do we make electricity today? We actually use steam turbines. That's how coal power plants are run. They use a steam turbine. And here the efficiency of a steam turbine is quite high, actually. It's 40% efficient. And but still we need to do this calculation, and we end up with only 1.63% efficiency of the photon to electricity conversion there. And then we could also power these steam turbines with the sunlight instead of using a biomass fuel or a fossil fuel. And in that case, of course, if we do use some mirrors that concentrate solar light to heat up some water in a boiler that then runs the power plant, then of course it would be much more efficient because we don't have to multiply with these 4.3%, and it would get to an efficiency of 38%. You could say, why, if it's so efficient, why haven't we done any solar-powered electricity plants? Well, we actually have done a few, but they haven't been very economical, because it turns out you have to produce all these mirrors, and they have to be at a pretty high standard in order to concentrate the solar light in a central tower. I'll show a picture of it later on. And they all have to, the sun doesn't stand still on the sky, it moves. So you have to put some robot arms to move these mirrors all the time. And it turns out it's just too costly currently to do it that way. And things break down. You have to repair these robot arms and mirrors, and dust settle on the mirror so they don't reflect as much as they should. So we don't do it. It's still cheaper to power plants with the burning of fossil fuels. And then we have finally, you can also, instead of using fuel to heat up some water and then have steam from that you use in a turbine, you can also, what most power plants today do, they have a gas turbine in a combined cycle where you first combust a gas, and that combustion will expand the gas rapidly, and you use that expansion of gas to run a turbine, a gas-driven turbine, and then the exhaust gas from that is still hot enough to boil some water that can then run a steam turbine. So first you have a gas turbine, and then at the end of that you have a steam turbine. And then you have a combined efficiency from chemical energy to mechanical energy at 60% efficiency. But again, we have to note where this chemical energy came from. It came from photosynthesis that is at most 4.3% efficient. So the end result is an efficiency of 2.45% efficiency. So that's pretty much it for this table here. Okay, I wanted to say a few words about photosynthesis. One of the most common form of photosynthesis, and the one that us as humans depend on, is this one that converts water molecules and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, plus solar light, that's the energy here, into glucose and oxygen. And I think that's such a beautiful, simple thing, because it's glucose and oxygen that we have here That's what humans and other animals use to power their bodies and brains. And the exhaust, you would say, product from our burn here, that's water and CO2 that then is used by the plants to produce what we burn. So this is a beautiful symbiosis of life that I'm amazed about it. And it should also be said that photosynthesis is a lot of things, and this I've mentioned right here is just one of them, the one that's most important for humans and life similar to humans. But it started 3.4 billion years ago, and at that time it didn't produce oxygen, and pretty sure it didn't produce glucose. Maybe it did, but I'm not an expert in it. But the first oxygen generating photosynthesis that appeared 2.7 billion years ago, and that was in a bacteria, not in a plant. And then what we normally understand as photosynthesis and this transformation up here, that's done in green plants and algae. And this green algae photosynthesis, that's 750 million years old. And the green plant photosynthesis is just 420 million years old. And that was also plants, that was also the time when plants actually made it to land and started to covering all the earth with plants. Before that, the life existed pretty much only in the oceans. So that's how that was. Then this next table it's one I found at Wikipedia, and it's a great table. It shows all the available solar cells that have been developed in various technologies. We mentioned the super high efficiency of 47.1% efficiency. That's this multi-junction cell here. And there are various forms of these cells that are both concentrated, that concentrate solar light on them, and non-concentrating solar cells that doesn't concentrate solar light on them. And then there are several junctions. Now we have reached a 4-junction cell. That will probably be a 5-junction cell in the future that can get even higher than 47.1% efficiency. I'm pretty sure we'll get a little higher. You can see it's going up with these efficiencies over time. They have been developed steadily more efficient solar panels. But I think the most important of these, there are all kind of cells here and technologies. The most important one are the crystalline silicium cells. That's the most commercially available cells. And there are single crystal cells, non-concentrator. They're pretty frequent, but most frequent one is multicrystalline cells. So this square here with a white bottom in it. And here we can see it in the graph. So how much efficiency does that have? It's 33.3% efficient. That's the most commonly used for creating power. So I just thought that table was interesting to see that solar power is getting more and more efficient and more economic each year. And then also there's an old picture here of a steam engine. I had a steam engine when I was a kid that I played with, so I know perfectly well how they function. But this is what is that? That's a steam engine from a mill that was probably grinding corn or something into flour. And here you have a piston or a cylinder with a piston inside where steam is let in and it pushes that out, moves this arm here that rotates this big wheel. And then the inertial power of this wheel rotating can actually push the piston back in, so it can be pushed out again with that steam. That's how that functions. And here we have an example of a turbine. This is a steam turbine, but a gas turbine would look completely similar. But a gas turbine that expand a burning gas would need to be made of materials that are more sophisticated, that can take more heat and more pressure and more stress. So gas turbines are normally more costly than steam turbines. Anyway, this is how they look here. You have the gas coming in from the small holes here. It expands through all these propellers that are sitting here. And here the gas exhaust comes out from this larger thing over here. So you can see that. And here we have a generator. It's not done with having a gas turbine. It's only making the mechanical energy. Here we have an old electricity generator. It's here we first have the steam engine right here. You can kind of see the shape of this is very similar to what we have here. So that's a steam turbine, and that turns around the generator, which is just a big electric motor here. That's how it looks. And this is from 1910, and they pretty much look the same today. They're just a little more sophisticated and has higher efficiencies than we did at that time. But it's principally the same thing that goes on. And here I have this, I mentioned this, that we could also produce electricity with solar light. And here we have an example of this. This is from high above, a picture from high above. Down here we have a desert with some mirrors that are all pointing to the central point here in the top of this tower, where there's a boiler sitting, and that's being heated up with all this solar light that's concentrated on this. And then it runs could be a steam turbine that it runs to generate electricity. But again, I looked this project up. It was operational in 2014, and it doesn't look like it was a big economic success. And they had problems actually keeping it running because lots of maintenance and stuff. But of course, if there are only a few of these projects globally, then you don't get the maturity that will figure out all these problems that are with mechanical problems and stuff. So I'm pretty sure that it's not completely over with these facilities here. Maybe in the future we'll go back to them, and we'll have combined, for instance, a solar cell, a multi-junction solar cell, concentrating solar cell that first makes electricity from that, and then but that needs to be cool, or it will melt and burn and destroy itself if it just get all that sunlight without any cooling. So after that cooling, it could perhaps use that cooling water to run a steam turbine, and then get up to really high efficiencies where you combine solar cells with steam turbines for cooling of the same solar cells. And these facilities could look a lot like this, and maybe that will be economic in the future and achieve the highest efficiencies that we can imagine. It's a possibility. And then, of course, as I always have here in my presentations, I have a lot of sources where you can download it and dig into the details of everything I've said here. Okay, then the next thing here is chapter 6. And now we are going to look at global electricity production by source. And as you can see, I'm definitely going to cover solar cells, biomass, coal power, conventional power plants, wind power, hydropower, and nuclear, and others. So the first graph I want to show you here is electricity production by source for the entire planet, the entire world. And as you can see, it goes from 1985 to 2021. And there has been a lot of growth in electricity since then, from about 10,000 terawatt hours per year to, 28,000, looks like 28,000 terawatt hours per year. And you can see both coal and gas has grown, oil has dropped, nuclear has grown a little bit, but then kind of seems to have stayed the same. And hydropower seems to have grown slowly here. Then we have wind power. Wind power seems to have not existed before year 2000, but then it has grown. And solar power also only existed, it didn't exist really in 2000 and 11, it didn't exist, and then it suddenly has appeared here. And then there are other renewables that would be bioenergy, really, wood pellets, burning of wood pellets. But that's this graph. A more interesting graph is this one that shows the same sources of electricity, but now computed as a percentage share of the total. So they all sum up to 100%, and they do that for all years. Here we can actually see which energy sources that are growing and which are relatively and which are decreasing relatively. And as we can see from 2010, what has happened? Coal has decreased. It didn't look like that in the other graph. It looked like coal was increasing, but here it's the share of powering with coal is decreasing. Natural gas power plants, they are pretty much stayed the same since 2010, small growth. Hydropower stayed the same or slightly negative since 2010, and then nuclear has had negative growth since 2010, and also oil has decreased since 2010. So they all of these have decreased or stayed the same. The only thing that has grown positively since 2010 is wind and solar. So that's kind of interesting. The only two forms of electricity generating means that are growing is wind and solar. And so let's calculate the actual growth rates. I've done that in this table here. And here we can see the global power here. It was 28,000 terawatt hours. I've relabeled it in kilowatt hours because kilowatt hours is what we can kind of relate to in our own household. Okay, so the global power is 100%. Here we can see solar power is 3.55%, but it has and I have ranked them according to what grows the most, because that's what I think is most interesting. Solar power is definitely growing the fastest, 25% growth per year in electricity produced, and it's followed by wind power at 15% growth per year, followed by, again, biomass power. That would be wood pellet burning. Instead of burning coal, they burn wood pellets in traditional coal power plants. And then we have geothermal power at 3.3%. Hydropower has grown by 1.31%. But the thing is, the global power itself has grown by 2.45%. So if you grow with faster rate than that, then of course you will increase your share. If you grow with less than that rate, then your share of the overall picture will be decreasing. So hydropower's overall share of the picture is decreasing now because it's not growing as fast as the average growth in global power. And we can also see that these are all the renewable fuels. And fortunately, they are growing, most of them above the general growth. And then we go to the non-sustainable kinds of fuels. That would be gas-powered power plants. They're growing at 1.81%. So they are falling in importance from the total growth picture here. And coal power, even less growth at 0.7%. And then we have nuclear power, fission power. That's negative growth, outright negative growth of minus 0.3%. And here we can also see how much they represent of the total share. So yeah, solar power is not so much still, but at that growth rate, it will quickly become pretty big, as we shall see in a prognosis I'll do later in a later chapter. And wind power 6.6%, and then we have biomass. It's not very important, 2.3%. Geothermal power, even less important, at 1/3 of a percentage. But in some countries, actually, geothermal power is important. I can give you an example. Iceland the Scandinavian nation of Iceland, it's only a nation of 300,000 people, but 1/3 of their energy is coming from geothermal power, because they're basically, they can dig down a few meters and then they will have really hot temperatures that can run a steam turbine. So the other 2/3 of their energy is coming from hydropower. So that was just a little example of that. So anyway, renewables globally totally account for almost 28.17%. That is renewable of all the electric power production, but it's growing a lot faster than the non-renewables or non-sustainables that are down here, that are 72% of global electricity production. Now, there is some myth about that, okay, but we can't, solar and wind power will never power a lot because, there's only a very little available of that. It's not true. The potential solar power, if we assume that we cover 1% of Earth with solar panels at 25% efficiency, something we could easily do, if the oceans cover 70% of the surface of the Earth, so we could just put a lot of solar power in the oceans, nobody would notice. And so covering 1% of the planet with solar panels is not a problem. And if we do that at 25% efficiency, what we would produce of electricity from that would be almost 8,000 percentage of the current production of 100. So it would be 80 times the current. They would produce enough electricity to power all electricity we currently produce, and then 80 times more. So, and you could, even if you go to the limit of this, you could actually 10x this. So it could be 800 times more. There are potentially, we could power the planet 800 times over alone with solar power. So there's plenty of that. And we can do the same calculation really here for wind power. What is the potential of wind power? Well, a 10 megawatt turbine, that's something they use already. They even have bigger turbines offshore. And if we put just one of these 10 megawatt turbines per 10 square mile on Earth, then we could generate 16 times more electricity than the total electricity that's generated currently on Earth. So 16 times over, 16 times this amount here, 28,000 terawatt hours times 16, just alone with wind power. So solar and wind can easily power all of our electricity production if we build more of it. So that, a lot of people don't know that, unfortunately. So what else could we say? I also have some numbers. I included the installed capacity that's installed, and then I reported the capacity factor on average for that segment of energy. And as you can see, nuclear power plants have high capacity factors. That means they're running at 77% of the time they are running during the year at full speed producing electricity, whereas a solar power, they're only producing electricity at full speed on average 13.5% of the time. So that's how you read a capacity factor. So I just thought that was interesting. And wind power has a little bit higher capacity factor of 26% of the time. The wind turbines are actually making electricity at full speed. And that's why we have a lot of intermittency from solar and wind, because they don't always produce electricity like the other sources that you can turn on and off. And then I have, as always, some sources for what I have stated here, so you can check it that I'm not talking rubbish. And more sources. And then we go to the next chapter here, the cost of electricity production by source. Because one thing is to know how much electricity is made currently and how much it grows, but the really important thing is how much does it cost, and is there any tendencies in this cost. So let's talk about that now. So here I have made a table that shows the global cost of electricity production by source. And I've looked up a lot of sources to get these costs that are down here. Leveraged cost of generation in US dollar per kilowatt hour. That's the cost of producing electricity. There will be some extra. If you sit in a household and say, well, oh yeah, I'm paying more than this, then it's because there are some cost of distributing the electricity that you also have to pay for, plus taxes. And it would also be an average of all of these things here that you probably pay. Anyway, what is interesting to see here is that solar power from photovoltaics fixed, meaning they don't track the sun. That's the cheapest form of energy that we can generate currently here in 2021. It's only 3.9 cents per kilowatt hour. And tracking solar power, that's more expensive, 4.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And then solar PV residential, as you would expect, it is more expensive because it's a small facility. These are for utility scale, these two up here. But for a residential solar panel on your house, that would be almost 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we have onshore wind power. That's also very affordable at 4.1 cents. And you can see solar power and wind power are those that grows the most. And if you look at all the other costs down here for everything else, they are all above in cost per kilowatt hour for produced kilowatt hour than solar and wind power. And they also grow a lot less. So that's kind of the big takeaway here from this. I have also included the cost of how much does it cost to set up 1 gigawatt of capacity for solar power and the different kinds of powers here. So you can see solar power has gotten quite affordable now in terms of 1 gigawatt. 1 gigawatt of capacity of solar power costs less than $1 billion to set up, whereas you can see a nuclear power plant, 1 gigawatt of nuclear power costs $6 billion. But it's fair to say that the capacity factor is higher for nuclear power, so it's not quite fair to just look at cost per capacity installed when looking at these numbers. Then, of course, there's fuel. The cost of setting up the power plant is not the only cost. There's also fuel cost. And here for solar power, there are no fuel costs, same as for wind. There are zero fuel costs. But of course, they have maintenance and operating costs. Everything has that. And so, but this levelized cost of generation, that's kind of the final cost calculation you make that takes into account all of these other costs. So that's what you have from this table. I think it's super important, but there's not much to it. It's quite simple to read, but it is the most important thing. That is, what does things cost? We can also see over time, I found a great source here about how the cost here has mostly fallen over time for especially solar power. In 2011, it was really expensive to make solar power. At 40, here it's about 42, 43 cents in 2011 for solar power. And then it has dropped all the way here in this source to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. That was a little bit different from this table where I have 4 cents per kilowatt hour, but that's because I have a different source. So I have used different sources, but they more or less coincide. They are more or less confirming each other in their cost picture. And what can you see? Offshore wind has also gone from something that was quite high in 1983 and then all the way down here to actually become, in this source here, become the cheapest form of electricity. So it really is the future of electricity. It really looks like it's going to be wind and solar because they are the cheapest one, and they are also the one that are falling the fastest in terms of cost per kilowatt hour produced. We also have all the other geothermal and offshore wind that is quite a lot more costly. We have concentrated solar power. It has also fallen a lot, but still cannot compete with the non-concentrated solar power and solar panels. And then we have here in this graph, we actually also have the price of fossil fuels. They have set here the fossil fuels low end of price range, about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the high end of fossil fuel, that'll be about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'd say right now we are definitely in the high end of fossil fuel power here in Europe because of this Ukraine war, and prices for coal and gas has shot up dramatically. So it costs a lot more with fossil fuel generation right now than for renewables. So let's move on. But you could say if wind and solar are the cheapest one, why don't they grow even faster than, solar grow at 25% per year and wind power is growing at 15% per year? Why don't they grow faster? Couldn't we grow them faster? And I think one of the reasons they're not growing faster is that's a tweet here I found from a guy who posted that a German engineer shows the file needed to build one wind turbine in 2002. That was a single thin folder, the one he holds in his hand right there, about 20 pages of legal documents. And then he shows 25 thick folders it takes in 2022 to build just one wind turbine. And those are those folders lined up here on his desk. It's insane, the legislative burden that currently exists to build renewable energy that solves the climate problem, that solves our energy problem, is insane. It's not funny. And you could say we really should pass a law that scraps everything we have done with environmental legislation since 2002, just scraps it and roll it back to 2002. Because what has been done since 2002 is that lobbyists has added all kind of idiotic rules and red tape, you could say, for getting anything done. And why do they do that? And where do these lobbyists come from? Well, I'd say that this is lobbyists from fossil fuel industry and existing power sources industry. They don't want anything to change. And the best thing to stop all change so they can keep making dirty electricity at expensive prices, that is to make it impossible to set anything new up. Because solar and wind, they need to have permissions to set up new production. Whereas fossil fuels, it's not growing, it's going down. They don't need any new permissions. They got their permissions many decades ago for what they have, and they can keep using that forever. Whereas solar and wind power, they need new permissions. So there's a lobbying effort to make it almost impossible to do anything new. But still, they are growing at 25 to 15%, so it's not completely hopeless. But it just makes me a little bit angry, or quite a lot angry, that we allow this draconian red tape to build up in our legislation. We shouldn't do that. That could stop all growth, really. We should not do that. But okay, enough about that. Here I want to show you a little bit about nuclear power in Sweden. Now, Sweden made a decision to phase out all nuclear in 2010, but then they decided not to do it anyway. So it's actually not, they don't have any rules about phase out of nuclear. But still, as you can see, a couple of nuclear reactors in Sweden was shut down in 2020 and 2019. They were not shut down because they had to, because of legislation, but because they were not economic. But then this Ukraine stuff war happened, and electricity has become really expensive here in Europe, and that has kind of changed the economics for these for nuclear energy in Sweden. So now there's here actually in October, that's very recent, October 2022, they decided that they would restart these two Ringhals 1 and 2. Restart that to make electricity. And it's actually not so much because the Swede needs it. It's more for exporting electricity to other European countries at a profitable price for Sweden. And that's why they're restarting these nuclear reactors. So that's something I thought was interesting to talk about. And here you can see Swedish electricity production. Today it's done because they shut down these two nuclear reactors. You could see that the percentage of the production from nuclear dropped here, but it will come back up now when they restart them up. And basically Sweden has, nearly all of it is renewable electricity. It's hydro, then it's nuclear, and then it's wind power and biomass. A little bit of solar has appeared here, but then there's also very little fossil fuel. So it's basically renewable fuel plus that nuclear that still exists here. But my prediction is that nuclear will be back in Sweden and go up a little bit, and then when electricity prices start to drop again, then they'll start closing these other nuclear reactors. That's how it'll go. We can also take an example here from Germany. Germany has also, you can see over time here, Germany has gotten more and more wind into the production of electricity in Germany, and also biomass has appeared, wood pellets. And yeah, they have a little bit of hydropower, stayed the same. And then solar has also appeared to become important now. And then they have nuclear energy. Nuclear energy now, Germany, unlike Sweden, has passed a law that will shut down all nuclear power in Germany eventually. But as you can see, nuclear power doesn't really, there's not much nuclear power left. So it's not as bad as it seems that they will shut. The media has talked a lot about Germany shutting down the nuclear power, and it would be a catastrophe. Currently, I think it would be stupid to shut down existing nuclear power because we have a crisis situation. You've got to come over that. But actually, you can see just 2 years of growth in renewable energy here in Germany. From here to here, it's almost as much as there's nuclear energy in Germany left. So it's not that renewable energy and how fast it grows in Germany will quickly make up for whatever loss in power that will come from shutting down the remaining nuclear reactors in Germany. So I thought that was also interesting to hear, because we have had so much talk in the media about shutting down of nuclear reactors in Germany. I don't think it should be done right now, of course, but it won't be a problem long term that Germany is shutting down its nuclear power. It is more expensive, that energy, so it will shut down for economic reasons if it wasn't for that law. And then I also wanted to show you just how much gas prices here in Europe has risen. This is the cost of natural gas. They used to be like 20, 30 euros per megawatt hour, and now they are 136 euros per megawatt hour of gas. That's an insane increase. And they were even at one point, they were at almost 350 euro per megawatt hour. It's unprecedented, I'd say, that the price has increased so much. But of course, it will be a temporary situation until we get enough renewable power up and running, and until we get, I guess, also some coal power plants up and running that can replace the Russian gas that we used to burn to get electricity. But coal is not much better. As you can see, coal prices here, global coal prices, normally coal is about $80, and now it's $400. So bad. Not as bad as gas, but pretty bad. And there I have some sources from my previous slides here. And now we get to chapter 8. Okay, so in this chapter we will talk about the intermittency of solar and wind power and how to deal with it. The first way to deal with it is using some hydropower, because that can be turned on and off to offset this intermittency of wind and solar. But a problem with hydropower is, of course, not all countries have hydropower in their grid. to do that. So more likely it is that countries will have coal, oil, and gas power plants that can be turned on and off to offset the intermittency of an increasing share of solar and wind power. But of course, that's not what we want long term, because it's not a sustainable solution. It's only a temporary solution for as long as we have oil and gas and coal at prices that can make sense. So another solution is biomass power, where you basically, that's basically a coal power plant that instead of burning coal, burns wood pellets, and therefore it functions like a coal power plant that can be turned on and off, and therefore also deal with intermittency of solar and wind. A fourth solution to this problem is to have battery storage that of course also can be turned on and off. You can charge the batteries in the grid when you have excess supply of electricity from solar and wind, and discharge when you produce very little solar and wind. But the problem with battery power in the grid is that it's very expensive to install these batteries, so it's only economic to do it with daily grid intermittency. If these intermittencies run over more than a day, then we need other solutions. So a fifth solution could be to use smart grids, where the price of electricity is communicated in real time to consumers of electricity. So they have an option to increase and decrease their assumption according to how the price of electricity is currently in the grid. And of course, if there's a lot of electricity production from solar and wind, the price will be low, and then the demand could be increased by communicating these low prices, and vice versa. If the production of solar and wind is low, then the prices will be high, and that would induce consumers of electricity to turn off their appliances and whatever they have that consumes electricity. Also, industrial use of electricity would go down. If they see the prices is high, then they might shut down production, because it doesn't pay to stay in production with very high prices. And that could be a way to equal demand and supply in the grid for electricity, or market for electricity. So a sixth way of doing it could be to build more high voltage transmission lines. If we build more transmission lines, we could transfer energy from high production areas of solar and wind energy to low production areas of solar and wind energy, because weather systems are more or less the same all over, on average, all over the world. So there will always be some places where there's sun and wind, and they should of course be able to export it to other places where there's currently very little sun and wind. You could say a fun fact is that the Earth is always radiated with a more or less constant energy flow from the sun. So if we just build enough transmission lines to transfer that sun energy around the globe, well, then we have eliminated a big deal of these intermittency problems. But there is another way to deal with intermittency that people don't talk enough about. And that's by overbuilding capacity for solar and wind, because obviously the problem is too little production. It's never too much production of electricity. It's really bad to have too little production, but not too much. That's a luxury problem. So if you double the capacity installed for solar and wind, then you'll also have twice as much production from solar and wind when they produce the least energy, and then the problem will be much less. An electricity grid with high capacity for solar and wind could have many periods during the year where electricity prices are close to 0 cents per kilowatt, and still electricity needs to be wasted because there's not enough demand to take all this electricity supply. There is an example here from my own country, Denmark. We have more than 50% of our electricity on average is made by wind turbines. And here in 2020, we had to throw out what compared to 4.3% of our electricity because it had no demand for it. There was simply too much electricity produced by these wind turbines, so they had to throw that electricity out. We are solving that problem by building more transmission lines to Norway that has a lot of hydropower. But anyway, if you have a grid where these periods where you actually have to throw electricity out and electricity prices are zero, and you have several of these periods during the year, then thermal energy storage could be a great solution to spend this excess supply of electricity in a grid with a lot of solar and wind in it. So the last intermittency solution I'd like to talk about is this high temperature thermal energy storage that can be used to store solar and wind energy in large quantities over a long time, so many months, at much less cost than using batteries. That is only really useful in a daily setting. For example, 1 cubic meter of granite rock cooled from 600 degrees Celsius to 200 degrees Celsius, that actually represents an energy content of 211 kilowatt hours of energy. And that's quite a lot. You could compare it to a good lithium battery that typically is 400 watt hours per liter. So that would be 400 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. But rock nearly costs nothing. And a lithium battery that big, 400 kilowatt hours, will cost, let's say it costs $100 per kilowatt hour. That would be $40,000 for a cubic meter of battery. And compare that to a cubic meter of rock, that would probably be $50 or so. So it scales a lot better, cheaper, if you have this high temperature thermal energy storage. And what you can do with these 211 kilowatt hours is that you can use it to heat, of course, steam or water, and create a steam, and then run a steam turbine that can convert those kilowatt hours into 40% electricity, and then the rest 60% could be used, for instance, for district heating. So high temperature thermal energy storage and subsequent electric generation is not economically viable unless there's a large amount of electricity available at very low cost frequently during the year, and that will happen if we get a lot more solar and wind. So that is, you would say, the ultimate solution for intermittency of solar and wind, that we just start to set up these high temperature thermal energy storage unit all over the place. And the great thing about this technology is that it scales extremely well. It can be built in any country. Geography doesn't matter here. It can be built anywhere. So that is it. Then I have some sources for what I just said, as always. Okay, now we are at chapter 9, and in this chapter I will attempt to do a prognosis for when the global electricity production will become fully sustainable. And prognoses are not really interesting to read about unless you know a little bit about the assumptions that goes in behind them. And for that reason, we'll start by discussing these assumptions so you can judge by yourself whether you think my prognosis is any good or not by judging the realism of these assumptions. So let's begin with that. The first assumption I've made is that growth in global electricity consumption will increase from currently 2.45% annually to 3% annually starting from 2031. So we'll keep growing at the current level of 2.45%, and then starting in 2031 we'll increase that growth to 3%. And then we'll increase again in 2033, we'll increase that growth rate to 3.5%. And then again, we'll increase it in 2039, we'll increase the growth rate in electricity consumption to 4%. And then you can say, why would consumption of electricity increase from the current levels? Why would that happen? I have 3 reasons for that. And the first reason is that I expect that most heating services will become electrified using electric heat pumps. And that will happen because electricity prices will keep dropping as solar and wind power that are already today the cheapest sources of electricity, as we've seen, as they become a larger part of the grid, the electricity prices will drop. And also there are further progress to be made with solar and wind power so that they will have lower prices looking forward. So that will also help. And then we will also see, I expect that a large part of the transportation sector will transition to battery electric propulsion. That will both be with regard to land vehicles, but also with regard to ships and short and mid-range airplanes. Now, with regard to ships and short and mid-range airplanes, we haven't seen that so much so far, but it will come. The battery technology will become much better, and it also takes some time to develop new airplanes and ships that will use battery electric propulsion, but it will come. And since they consume a large part also of energy in the world today, that will have an effect that will increase the demand for electricity. And obviously with land vehicles, that's trucks and vehicles that we drive around on land, they will all become electrified. It's already in full motion, and I think everybody knows that this is going to happen. And then, of course, what I do not expect to become electrified is rockets and long-distance airplanes. But they could become sustainable simply by using renewable fuels that are made from biomass. And also the third reason that I expect that electricity consumption will increase is that data centers will consume ever more electricity, especially for AI-powered services. I'd say one service that will consume a lot of electricity and that will be everywhere in a not so distant future, just in a few years, is that we will have digital assistants, like we have Siri that's not very useful today, and Google Assistant that is a lot more useful. But services, AI services like that, where we can ask it all kind of things and get really good answers, that will take a lot of electricity to power. And these services will be everywhere, and they will be able to do more and more stuff. And you'll probably, as a human being, talk more to machines than you'll talk to other human beings, because they'll be so good at talking back to you. So I expect that will also consume a lot of electricity and contribute to the increase in growth rates for electricity consumption. There are other assumptions I make in my prognosis. For instance, I assume that all non-sustainable sources of electricity, that would be gas, oil, coal, and nuclear, we know that they are currently growing below the total growth rate of 2.45% per year. They're growing less than that already today. But I expect that they will continue to grow below that growth rate, and that some of them will actually have negative growth. So that's what I also assume here. And the reason for that expectation is that solar and wind power, unlike all the other power sources, continue to fall in price. So they'll keep growing at a higher rate than the average growth rate for electricity production or consumption, and simply outcompete other sources of electricity. And consequently, what I have done in my prognosis is that I treat all these non-sustainable electricity sources as a residual that I can calculate how much market share do they have. Well, they have the market share that's left over when we have considered the growth of wind power and solar power and some other renewable electricity sources. I also assume that solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and hydro, they keep growing at their current 2021 rates into the future. Then when we go further into the future, I'll make a few adjustments to that. But otherwise, I just keep their current growth rate and keep growing exponentially into the future. And why do I think it's an exponential growth? Because it is an exponential growth. When you see this graph here has plotted capacity for solar electric production, It has plotted that on the y-axis, and it's a logarithmic scale. And then it has plotted time here on the x-axis. And we can see we can fit a linear line through all these data points. And that means when you have that on a logarithmic scale, it means we have a constant exponential growth in production of electricity from solar panels. That's why I know it's exponential. And here it should be said that all governmental prognosis of how the energy future will look like, they don't, for some crazy reason, they never use exponentials. They always assume linear growth, which is definitely not. It's definitely not linear growth, but they keep doing it, keep repeating that error year after year. That's why we have YouTube channels with some expert. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but people who are more dedicated to the truth and not political reasons for saying what they say, because that's what I think is behind this governmental predictions. They're political, they're not an attempt to actually make a real prediction about the future. I'm not bribable in any sense. I just stick to what I think is the most reasonable. And that's why you should watch this channel. I'm honest. I really am. Okay. We have some further assumptions that goes into my prediction. In 2032, that will be the last year that global electricity production equals global electricity consumption in my prognosis, with sustainable power being at that time about 73% of production and non-sustainable powers being 27% of production at that time. Starting in 2033, total power consumption at 100%. Consumption is always defined as 100%. My model here, or prognosis, that will consumption here at 100% will be less than total power production that now increases above 100%, and in that year it'll be 105%, and then it'll just keep increasing. Power production will be higher than consumption because one of the most economic ways to deal with the intermittency of ever more solar and wind power production is to build more capacity for exactly wind and solar power than it's possible to consume on average. So intermittency, one way to deal with it is simply to build more wind and solar so they can produce more electricity when the weather systems means that there's little wind, little solar, and they produce not so much. But if you have installed more capacity, of course, you will have a higher production, even when it's low. And then starting in 2042, non-sustainable sources of energy will no longer be needed at all. It will have dropped to zero because we have enough intermittency solutions in the grid for solar and wind to have it covered so that we don't need any fossil fuel power plants or any nuclear power plants in the grid. But at that time, I also expect that actually the ability to produce electricity in the system is at 170% of total consumption. So a lot of electricity presumably is wasted in this system. But I will talk in a minute about why it's not actually going to be wasted. It will be used for storage solutions. Okay, so let's get to the actual prognosis. And I'm sorry that it is such a overwhelming large spreadsheet here with a lot of numbers in it, but there was no other way I could do it. If you like to see it in Excel spreadsheet, you can download that Excel spreadsheet. There's a link below here where you can download it. So how do we read this spreadsheet here? The first thing is that we have all the years here in this column, and they're also repeated over here in the last column. And so 2019, 2020, etc., all the way up. And then we have the second column here would be global electric power consumption in kilowatt hours. And then we have in the next columns, we have solar power production, wind power production, biomass power production, geothermal power production, and then hydropower production. And I have calculated the share of this power production as a percentage of total global electric power consumption, that's always that is by definition set to 100%. This is this over here. So that share of the total consumption is always set to 100%. And we have a kilowatt hour over here of that, what that represents in kilowatt hours. So, but for each of these renewable power sources, I've calculated the percentage share of that global consumption. How much it represents of global consumption. And then I add up all these percentage shares for renewable power production into this sustainable power share production. So that's the sum of all these shares. And then in this column here, I have all the non-sustainable power share production, also represented by a percentage share. And to begin with, it's just a residual, as we discussed in my assumptions. It's just calculated as a residual of, we take a look at what is consumption of electricity is 100%, and then we subtract the share of sustainable power production, and the number we get here will simply be the non-sustainable share of power production. But then when we get to the year 2033, then I start to not calculate this one as a residual, but I simply plot in some percentages that I believe is reasonable, that it will drop, because it will keep dropping. And then I keep dropping it with some percentages I believe is reasonable. And that's the reason why you can see that when we add these two sums up from sustainable power share of production and non-sustainable power share of production, they are able to be more than 100% of total consumption, electric power consumption. So that's why starting in 2033, we can see that total global power production is 105% of consumption, which is now always 100% all the way down. And the reason that we have more production than consumption in this grid starting from 2033 is that we are overbuilding with solar and wind power simply to deal with intermittencies of solar and wind power. When we are getting more and more of it, intermittency problems will also be bigger, and you need more drastical solutions to deal with it. And one of the ways I've shown that we can deal with this solution is simply to build even more solar and wind powers. And that's why we have this weird situation of that we actually make more electricity on average than we can consume. And that's why it goes over 100% here. But as I will shortly explain, that's not what what I actually expect is going to happen, because if you have these situations where you have to dump a lot of electricity that you cannot use, then the price, of course, of electricity for that electricity that you otherwise would have to dump, that'll go to zero. And if electricity is free, well, then energy solution like thermal storage will suddenly become very profitable, because they can get the energy for free, and then they can store the energy and regenerate it, apply it inefficiently, but then sell it back to the system at higher prices when there's little solar and wind power in the grid, and you actually have positive prices for electricity. But anyway, I expect here that in 2042, that will be the last year we'll have any need for non-sustainable power sources like oil, gas, coal, and also nuclear. It will drop to zero, but at that time we'll also have a large production of wind and solar power, and it will sum up to 170% of total consumption. And you can see I have predicted here that the share of solar power will be 96%, and then there'll be some 60% will be wind power. Then there'll be a biomass power where you use wood pellets in thermal power plants, like a coal power plant just fired up with wood pellets. That'll be 5% of electricity production, and that of course helps with intermittency. And then we will also have some geothermal production, but it will be just as small almost as it was in the beginning. It's at 0.37%. So in the beginning here in 2021, it's just 0.35%, so almost identical. And then we'll have hydropower is dropping slowly from 15%, and will be in 2042 expected to drop to about 9% of total electricity consumption. So that's it for this table, but I still have some comments to make, so let's move on to that. So the first comment is that this prediction is not an attempt to be exact with regard to which year Earth will go fully renewable. You know, it could happen sooner or later, depending on whether political developments will press to speed this process up or slow it down. Also, different countries will have different opportunities, such as some countries will have an abundance of hydropower, like Norway and Iceland, and also Sweden and Canada. So, of course, they will use a lot of hydropower, and other countries will have a lot of fossil fuel stills, and some countries will be benefited by different weather systems that can determine the economics of wind and solar. So all that will affect which countries will get fully renewable in their electricity supply and when that will happen. Therefore, the general global picture will look very different for individual countries and their time to become fully renewable. Some countries, I expect, will become fully renewable much before 2042, and others will take some longer than that. For instance, Norway and Iceland, they're actually already today fully renewable. They have 100% of their electric production done by renewable sources. In Iceland, it's done by 1/3 geothermal electric power and 2/3 are hydropower. And in Norway, it's basically hydropower 100%. They're blessed with a lot of hydropower in that country. And I'd say Sweden is very close behind. They will also, just a few more years, 10 more years, and then Sweden will have 100% renewable sources. The same, I think, might happen with Denmark. It might take a little longer. Also, when electricity production from solar and wind approaches 100% or more of consumption, then the function of the electric grid will fundamentally change. In particular, during the year, there will be many more and longer periods where prices for electricity approaches $0 per kilowatt hours because supply exceeds demand. And in such a grid, high temperature thermal energy storage that we talked a little bit about will become economic, because now such systems can buy electricity for heating of these rocks at say 1 cent per kilowatt hour, and then sell regenerated electricity at up to 38% efficiency back at other times for much higher prices when solar and wind make less energy than a grid demands. So that's how that will function. And indeed, it could be expected that such high temperature thermal energy storage systems, that they may consume 20 to 40% of all electricity produced in the grid, and thus no electricity need to be wasted in a grid that's 100% based on solar and wind power, because whatever excess electricity there is that cannot be consumed by other sources, well, you can always heat up some stone, so you have some heated stone to use for whenever solar and wind cannot make up for demand, and then you can turn on these thermal power plants that uses heated rock. And it should also be noted that these HTTS systems, they scale much more affordable than battery backup. But the backside is that they're only up to 38% efficient. Now, battery backup is nearly 100% efficient. So, of course, with battery backup, you will use that for daily intermittencies, because then you don't need a lot of batteries, so it won't be so expensive to build. And they have the advantage of being highly efficient, nearly 100%. Whereas with the intermittencies that are seasonal, so that some from winter to summer, well, then you cannot use batteries because that would require a lot of batteries and they are very expensive, so it won't be economical. But then you can just build these thermal energy storage systems and they'll take care of that seasonal intermittency. Okay, then we have finally arrived at chapter 10, which is conclusions and also a talk about the best future use for nuclear fuels. Okay, so this presentation should have made it abundantly clear that solar power in combination with wind power and a few remedies to deal with their intermittency is how the civilization on Earth will power themselves in the not so distant future, say around 2042. This power scenario is happening not so much because of political promotion or obstruction, but mostly because it's the lowest cost power production scenario that we can imagine. All other power scenarios are more expensive, including that of a nuclear-based future, including fusion nuclear power. It will definitely be more expensive than solar power using solar cells and wind power. Okay, so this wind and solar power scenario also happens to solve environmental concerns and security concerns. Indeed, it makes all nations fully self-supplied with electricity that do also not contribute to global warming and air pollution. So what's not to like about that? The future of humanity will be better as a result of that, obviously, and also because electricity prices will keep dropping and make everything that we produce that requires energy cheaper. So it will be a better future because of that development. And now I could actually end my presentation and say, now that's it, that's what I wanted to say. But I want to say a few more words about nuclear energy that I think is important. As argued, nuclear energy is not needed to power anything on Earth, and it's also more expensive per kilowatt hour than both solar and wind power. However, the fact is that ultra long-term survival of civilizations, whether biological or not, critically depend on the finite fuels available here in our solar system for nuclear fission and fusion. So what fuels do we have in our solar system for that? We have uranium-235 that we use in our nuclear power plants today. Then we have thorium that could be used in nuclear power plants for fission and that we haven't used, but we could do it. And we probably also have some other elements that I don't know of that we could turn into fission for generating electricity. And then we have lithium deuteride, or we have lithium and we have heavy hydrogen or hydrogen-2 isotope. But they are the fuels we need for creating fusion energy that we haven't succeeded with in a peaceful setting, but only for making hydrogen bombs. But they are the fuels that we need. But they are actually finite. They are limited unlike what most popular media wants to tell you, that it's infinite, that you have infinite energy from this. No, you do not. You definitely do not, especially not if we're talking millions of years. Then we will run out of lithium. We will use all the lithium for this fusion if we use it here in our solar system to power stuff. So what I suggest instead is that we reserve these fuels to power large generational spaceships that are able to bring civilizations to other solar systems or black holes in the universe, where we can start colonizing other solar systems and black holes. And in order to survive a journey to another solar system or black hole, you'll have to bring your own power source, because radiation from other stars and black holes in interstellar space is too weak to power anything meaningful on a large spaceship. You need to bring your own power source, and the only energy source that is powerful enough to power ships for long journeys, that is nuclear fuels. So if we don't have nuclear fuels, you simply won't be able to make these journeys. So in my opinion, the best use for the finite nuclear fuels available in our solar system should be to reserve it for interstellar journeys and also to power outposts beyond Saturn in our own solar system when we colonize our own solar system. I can say, just for a little fun fact, Here at Earth, we have about a solar radiation that has about 1,400 watts per square meter at Earth, at the distance we have from the sun. That's how much energy there is in it, and that's quite a lot. 1,400 watt per square meter. But at Saturn, that has dropped to 15 watt per square meter. And there'll also be a loss when you use a solar panel to harvest that energy. So I'd say if you go further out in our solar system, then it will drop below those 15 watt, and then you'll need some nuclear power of some sort in order to run an outpost or a space station further out in the solar system. So I think we should also use nuclear fuels for that. So we should ask ourselves the question, how long can our civilization carry on if you are able to expand to other solar systems and black holes using nuclear fuel we got in our solar system and other solar systems that we colonize? And the answer to that is civilizations could exist for trillions of years into the future. And 1 trillion year is 1,000 billion. So it's quite a lot of time. And for comparison, our own universe started with a Big Bang that started only 13.5 billion years ago. So when I'm talking about trillions of years, that's really a long time. Much, much older than our universe is old currently. And it should be noted that going at more than 1,000th the speed of light, it will take about 5,000 to 10,000 years to travel to the nearest solar systems that are 5 to 10 light years away from our solar system. So just the nearest solar systems, it will take 5 to 10,000 years to get there. That's a lot of time. And it's not realistic to say we can go faster than 1,000th the speed of light, because the kinetic energy of hitting stuff in interstellar space that will also have dust and rocks and stuff flowing around, that will destroy the starship if we go faster than that. 1,000th the speed of light is a lot faster than the speed of a bullet from a gun. And the bullet from a gun can kill a man, but 1,000th the speed of light, that's like, I haven't done the calculation, but I think it's tens of thousands times more faster than the speed of a bullet. So it also got that much more energy in it. And if you that rock hit your spaceship that is coming zooming through space there, then it will create a large explosion. So you cannot travel faster. This nonsense about traveling at close to light speed or even faster than light speed, it's not going to happen. We are going to have a future where we are going to travel at most, I think, at 1,000th speed of light. And then we are going to have some enormous spaceships that do that, and they will have a defense system that scans the sky ahead of it where it travels, and then remove any rocks and stuff or dust that is ahead of it, so it doesn't hit anything. And they need time for that. They need ability to scan that space, and that's why you cannot go that fast. For comparison, how fast is 1,000th the speed of light? It sounds like it's slow, but it's not at all slow. The fastest object I believe mankind has made, is Voyager 1, that was slingshot around some planet to obtain extra speed, but that travels at 1/18,000th the speed of light. I think that it travels at 70,000 kilometers per hour, but that's still only 1/18th the speed of light. So that also tells us that to get to 1,000th the speed of light, we need a nuclear-powered rocket engine. We cannot do that with a chemical rocket engine. And we'd have to carry so much chemical rocket fuel, that it's just not possible. If you do the math on it, it's far from possible. The only way we can get that to that speed, high speed, 1,000th the speed of light, is to have nuclear rocket fuel, like fusion or fission rocket fuel. Also, the nearest galaxy to our galaxy, that's called, our galaxy is the Milky Way, and the nearest galaxy to the Milky Way, that's Andromeda. And how long is that away from us? Well, it's 2.5 million light years. So traveling at 1,000th the speed of light to the nearest galaxy will take that journey will take 2.5 billion years. That's a lot of time. But that's a Cetus paribus calculation. The fact is that Andromeda is actually moving in the direction of the Milky Way. So it will eventually bump into the Milky Way, and Milky Way and Andromeda will become one galaxy eventually. So it will take less time than 2.5 billion years to reach Andromeda. But the point is to make it crystal clear that without nuclear fuels, there is no way that we can make it alive to another solar system or a galaxy. Not as biological beings for sure. And if we are non-biological beings, then we are machines that are so advanced that we surpass all the capabilities of biological beings. And then, of course, we don't need as much energy. We could just put ourselves in sleep mode and use less energy, but we'll still use enough energy so that we need nuclear fuels when we need to go to another galaxy, for instance. We definitely need nuclear fuels for that. So, in my opinion, these arguments are made here that it will take a long time to travel to other solar systems and galaxies, and we really do need that nuclear fuel to do that. And that's the only way that we can have civilizations survive in this universe for trillions of years. It's the only way. And that, I think, is a really good argument for not using nuclear fuels in our solar system to power stuff in our solar system. No, they should be preserved for these journeys to other solar systems and galaxies. That's what we should use that precious fuel for. And with these words, I will end my presentation. I really hope you liked it. I spent quite a lot of hours gathering all this information and also making this presentation. So please click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I think they're extremely funny to make. I learn a lot myself when I do these videos and research a topic that I think is interesting to dig a little bit into. And as I mentioned previously, I'm non-bribable. I don't have any political reasons for what I do, and I don't even care that much about money. I don't do videos for clickbait either. I don't really care. My main objective with these videos is to get to the truth and to be as sincere and scientific as possible about what I investigate, and as little politics as possible, zero politics. That's why you should subscribe to this channel, because these videos will be interesting. I'm not attempting to manipulate you and your mind and what you think. I'm just trying to get to the truth here. That's it. And also to create a better future. Think about what it takes to create a better future. That's what I'm at. So with these words, I'll say goodbye and thank you very much for viewing this video all the way to the end here.